Hello everybody, it is Rosaline, and today I'm going to be doing a part 1 to the worst anime slash manga parents. Now, one of the reasons why this is going to be split into two is because while I was searching, I ended up with a lot more than I had originally intended. So in total, it's going to be 20 plus a few honorable mentions. Also, I'm going to point out that there will be spoilers in these, so if you haven't seen or read any of these, I highly recommend that you go ahead and go check them out and then come watch the video. And if you want to, go ahead and place your opinion on what in the comments below. So without further ado, here it is. Now, coming in at number 10 is King Altcray from Rising of the Shield Hero. Now, one of the reasons why he's at number 10 is that by nature, he's not actually a very mean father. He's actually quite a loving, nurturing dad. It's just that his parenting skills definitely need some work, especially when it came to his first daughter. Like, his parenting skills are so bad that it got to the point that his own wife openly admitted that she respected her husband up until their first child was born. And this actually got so bad that when their second daughter was born, she decided that she would not allow him to raise her. Like, over the years, he spoiled his eldest daughter, Mine, raising her to be a self-entitled, self-centered person. Not only this, but because of the way he raised her, he only encouraged her to act the way she does, and he also seems to honestly believe that his daughter was incapable of doing horrible things. Like, he's genuinely horrified and can't bring himself to believe it when he discovers that Mine purposely arranged and sabotaged Naofumi in an attempt to murder her sister and make it look like he did it. Like, he's a good father at heart, but his parenting skills definitely need a lot of work. On our number 9 spot, it is Madame Mo from Modazushi. Now, just like the previous person, Madame Mo wasn't actually a horrible mother. It's just that how she raised her son was a little bit questionable. Ever since he was a young boy, she spoiled him to the point where, as a result, he became a man-child. Whenever things didn't go his way, he would literally complain to her the same way a toddler would. She was also a very terrible aunt, making her son believe that it was because of his cousin that he didn't get to be a cultivator. But due to the way she raised her son was so entitled and snobby that, to be honest, he would have never been a cultivator. He wouldn't have been a very good one. Her constantly spoiling her son caused him to grow up with this belief that he was entitled to anything and everything, regardless if said thing didn't belong to him. An example of this is how he stole all of his cousin's belongings, but then denied it when he was confronted about it. But the biggest part was that when they were dealing with some fierce corpses, he decided to do the very thing that everyone had told him not to do, which was go in this one area, and he ended up stealing one of the artifacts that was actually used to lure a fierce corpse. I think it's ironic how his mother instantly blamed her nephew for the death of her son, when in reality it was her bad parenting that led to him suffering an early death. On our number 8 spot is Bernard Nighttree from Pandora Hearts. Now, Bernard was a part of a middle-class noble family, and for him, the pride of his family was so important to him that it seemed to overwhelm him more than the well-being of his own children. Like, it's really upsetting knowing that as his children began to die one by one, and his wife began to go insane out of grief, it didn't bother him. The pride of the family legacy was so important to him that he ended up basically beating that into all of his kids, especially his youngest son, Elliot, who was so focused on the family pride that he chose to commit suicide rather than choosing to live and deal with the consequences of his own actions. Like, the biggest irony is how his adopted son Vincent straight up tells him how it's upsetting to know that his youngest son died for the pride of the family, yet it didn't seem to bother him. Personally, I believe that Bernard deserved far much more than a quick beheading. On our number 7 spot is the mother of Giorno Giovanna from JoJo's Bizarre Adventures Golden Wind. Now, originally, I was actually going to put Dio on this list, mainly due to the fact that this guy has at least 4 confirmed children, and he's never seen any of them. But after looking into it, I realized that Giorno's mother was literally the worst out of the two. Like, when it comes to being a mother, it's pretty obvious that she was not cut out for motherhood, and instead chose the life of partying. During Giorno's origin reveal, it's revealed that when he was only 4 years old, she left him all alone in the house, leaving him scared in the dark. And it's even more messed up how, when one of her friends tells her if it's a really good idea for her to be leaving him by himself, not only does she respond by saying that he'll be fine, but she even has the nerve to say that some kid isn't going to ruin her night of fun. Like, some kid. She literally says it as though he isn't even her child to begin with. And to add further insult to injury, when she gets married to some guy, like, I'm not 100% sure if she was aware of it, but she literally left her son with a guy who physically abused him and would neglect him. Now, one of the reasons why she's not higher on this list is because even though she's a bad mother, it in a way shaped Giorno into the person he would later become in the show, and as a result, resulting with him becoming one of my favorite characters in the JoJo series. Now, number 6 is Jack's mother from Pandora Hearts. She was the mother of the main antagonist, Jack Vesalius. He was the result of her having an affair with a married nobleman, who, not long after getting her pregnant, had basically abandoned her. Before this, he gave her a pendant that had his family crest, and had promised her that someday he would come back for both her and Jack. Now, it was bad enough that she was way too young to be a mother, and especially to raise a child by herself. One of the things about Jack's mother was that she would fluctuate from being a good mother to being a horrible mother. There were times where she would tell him that she loved and adored him, and that the older he got, the more he resembled his father, which made her happy. Then she would automatically go to being this hateful woman who told him that he was a disgusting child born from adultery, and that she hated every time she looked at him because he looked like his dad. Like, it's really disturbing knowing that it's because of the way she raised her son, this results with him developing an unhealthy attachment towards his childhood friend Lacey. So much so that he was willing to do a lot of terrible things just to see her again. On our number 5 spot is Eri's mom from My Hero Academia. Now, she's not actually seen a lot, especially in the anime, since one of the few times she's seen is during an end credit. But one of the reasons why she's so high on the list is because of how she reacted once her daughter's quirk finally manifested. Like, she automatically branded her daughter a monster and a demon, and rather than trying to understand her daughter, she instead abandoned her daughter with her father, who turned out to be a far better parental figure. But one of the reasons why I really, really don't like this woman is because she was basically the main catalyst, giving Overhaul the material that he needed in order to create his quirk-destroying bullets. Like, this resulted with, I have no idea how many times worth of abuse that Eri had to endure at the hands of Overhaul. The abuse being so bad that not only did Eri develop an intense fear for almost everyone around her, but this got to the point where she literally forgot how to smile. And it took a lot for her to be able to be happy. Luckily, since Eri's still very young, she still has plenty of time for the damage that has been done to her to be undone, as long as she remains in the care of people who care for her. Which, thank goodness, she is in a safe spot now. At number 4, we have Arya's parents from Akamega Kill. Now, one of the things that I find interesting about these two is that technically they weren't terrible parents. They actually loved and adored their daughter. It's just that how they raised their daughter was extremely twisted. Now, the thing is, they developed this weird hobby where they would invite outsiders into their homes, drug them, and then brutally torture and kill them. And it's bad enough that they got their daughter involved in it, but they raised their daughter to believe that the people they hurt were just livestock that deserved it. Like, their daughter was so twisted that she had the nerve to say that her final victim should have been glad that she paid so much attention to her simply because she hated the fact that her victim had much prettier hair than her. And another thing that really disgusted me was when the father is about to be killed, he begs not to be killed and pleads for the life of his daughter. Like, people like this really annoy the crap out of me because it's perfectly okay for you to hurt people and treat them like dirt, but the moment the same thing happens to you, it's a bad thing. And usually I don't like seeing children die. Well, she wasn't a child, she was a teenager. Like, seeing people so young die. And so, before we get to our number 3 remaining spots, let's do some honorable mentions. Our first honorable mention goes to Mr. and Mrs. Hayworth from Pet Shop of Horrors. Now, just like the ones at the very bottom, Mr. and Mrs. Hayworth weren't exactly bad parents. In fact, they loved and adored their daughter, it's just that how they raised her is the problem. Now, Alice was born to rich parents, and she was their one and only child. Ever since she was a small girl, her parents had spoiled her, but to make matters worse, they never bothered to scold her whenever she did bad things. It was because of this, Alice's growth and development became stunted, and she had the mind of a small child. She grew up with this belief that she could do whatever she wanted, and if she did do bad things, then there would never be any consequences on her part. It was because of this, she was known for hurting people if she didn't get her way, and was even known for stealing stuff. And to be honest, out of her 2 parents, I feel like Mrs. Hayworth was truly the worst out of the 2, because she refused to accept the fact that her daughter had grown to be a very horrible person. Whenever she would talk about her daughter, she would go on and on about how her daughter was an angel, when people who actually knew Alice referred to her as a devil with an angel's face. Now, the real kicker is that over the years, Alice had developed a drug addiction, which eventually resulted with her being in the hospital, with her life literally hanging by a thread. While this was going on, her mother came to visit her in the hospital, and it's here that we see just how awful Mrs. Hayworth truly is. Whereas Alice asked her to get her some drugs, she willingly got her daughter the drugs and told her that this would be the only time she would ever do this. And this resulted with her daughter dying from a drug overdose. I think the real kicker, though, is that when Mrs. Hayworth was finally confronted for her actions, she refused to accept that she had done anything wrong. Her justification was that she didn't want her daughter to hate her, which is ironic considering it implies that she'd rather have her daughter dead than her hating her. But the biggest irony is when she declares that no one can understand because no matter what, Alice would always be her daughter, which is ironic since her mother's love is exactly what killed her. Now, our final honorable mention for the time being is Mrs. Soya from Junji Ito's Layers of Fear. Now, one of the things about Mrs. Soya is that she was abusive to not one but both of her daughters. She was completely obsessed with her younger daughter, Remy, whom she branded as being extremely beautiful. She was so obsessed with her daughter's appearance that she actually made Remy become a child star at the tender age of 2. And she would often talk about how she honestly believed that that was when Remy was truly at her best. She's so obsessed with her daughter's image that she fails to realize that her daughter never wanted this life to begin with. Her daughter was deprived of an actual childhood while her eldest daughter was completely neglected and ignored. I think the most messed up part is that when her eldest daughter, Narumi, points out how she never paid attention to her, she straight up tells her that there was nothing she could do for her because she was, and I repeat, simply too ugly, which results with her being so shocked that she accidentally gets into a car accident. One of the most messed up parts about Mrs. Soya is how she was the culprit responsible for the car accident, but she blamed it all on Narumi once it was revealed that a sign had actually impaled the car and it sliced off a piece of Remy's face. When it's revealed that Remy actually has layers upon layers of herself, she, rather than trying to get her daughter the help that she needs because she doesn't want her daughter to be seen as a freak, because, like I said, she's obsessed with her daughter's appearance. Whereas Narumi wants to see if it's possible that they could break what she believed was a curse. Unfortunately, Mrs. Soya ends up proving that she's too overbearing to the point where Remy has a mental breakdown, telling her mother to stop treating her this way because she is no longer a child, even straight up telling her that she's the reason why the car accident happened in the first place. Now, I think her biggest F up was when she decided that instead of reconcile with her daughters, she instead tried to communicate with the 2-year-old Remy. And once she succeeded, she literally proceeds to slice her daughter's layers off in the hopes of returning her back to that other self, believing that the adult Remy is more or less the wrong one. This ends up being a huge backfire because it's revealed that Remy's body had completely stretched out, and as a result, she didn't look as adorable as she did in the past. Rather than accepting that she had just permanently messed up her daughter, she actually tries to remove her own flesh. The downside is that after this, her daughter becomes a total opposite of what she was originally and becomes basically a grown woman with the mindset of a small child, repeating begging her mother to carry her. At our number 3 spot, it is Doma's parents from Demon Slayer. Now, in this case, they weren't abusive nor neglectful. Rather, they were stage parents. When their son Doma was born, he was born with an appearance that made him stand out, especially his rainbow-colored eyes. They groomed him to basically play the role of being in charge of a cult, and as a result, they made people believe that he was a god. And one of the things that I find more messed up is that his father actually used this in order for him to sneakily start cheating on his wife with the younger women. But when his wife found out, instead of confronting her husband, she had a total mental breakdown and brutally killed him in front of their son, and then proceeded to commit suicide in front of their son. Like, another thing that I find fascinating about Doma is that he didn't actually need to become a demon to be messed up, but it was because his parents establishing him as a living god, it made it easier for him to lure in and kill his female worshippers. So if he has anyone to thank for having an abundance of food without raising suspicion, it would be his mother and father for using him for attention and wealth. Okay, so coming in on our number 2 spot is Guansheng from Modazushi. Now, anyone who's seen my previous videos will know that he was in one of the worst deaths that I'd seen. When it comes to Guansheng, he was truly a terrible father. He only cared about his legitimate children and cared very little for the children that he had with mistresses. He was actually known for hating his illegitimate children. At one point, when, I don't remember whose birthday it was either his or it was his other son's birthday, but Guan Yao actually came to see him, and he literally shoved him down the stairs and didn't even bother to see if he was okay. He just left him there. And he actually would later go on to feign the grief of his legitimate son as an excuse to get rid of the political enemies that he had for greater power. And one of the most messed up things about him is that even when he did start paying attention to his illegitimate sons, it was only because deep down he knew he'd gain something from them. He took advantage of Guan Yao's desire to be noticed by him and began secretly using him to eliminate any enemies. Just in case he got caught, there was no way people could trace it back to him. And he also made it very clear to Guan Yao that he gave him power, he could easily take it when he had welcomed his other illegitimate son. He actually did this as a way of silently telling Guan Yao that if he were to ever betray him, he would simply be kicked out and replaced by his other brother. Like, it truly amazes me how you think that he would be a little bit careful with the people he chooses to screw over. But in the end, the one person who ended up causing his death was someone he honestly didn't think would have the courage to do that. Dramatic irony. And so, coming in on our number 1 spot is Karlhines from Diabolic Lovers. Now, when I was making this list, I originally intended to put his wives because, well, we see the abuse that they inflict upon their children. However, when I was looking into it, I learned that in reality, the abuse that they inflicted upon their children was literally simply the result of years worth of planning that Karlhines had been doing. Like, it truly fascinates me when it comes to the reason why he had children to begin with. Karlhines honestly believed that his species they weren't as amazing as humans because humans can experience love in a way that he can't understand. So he wanted to create a new species that had powers similar to his own kind, but were capable of understanding and experiencing human love. It was because of this he purposely put his wives against each other, causing them to break, and eventually they inflicted that onto their own children. He believed that by doing this, the children would not have demonic bonds and would be able to learn how to love through Eve, who is human. Unfortunately, he clearly failed to realize that because of the way his children are raised, they are emotionally incapable of love because a majority of them are too, well, except for Subaru, are too sadistic and self-centered to truly care about anyone other than themselves. And even when they do start to love, you can clearly see that the love that they express is very possessive and toxic, which is what you'd expect from the way they were raised. Like, I think it's kind of amusing how he married Beatrice for the sole purpose of having kids with her, but at the same time he did this in order to force Cordelia to want to have children with him. And even though he isn't seen much in the anime, in the game it's actually revealed that he did occasionally abuse his own children. He had thrown Subaru in the middle of an ocean because he destroyed a statue of him, and he even went as far as to send Shu into the mountains after it was revealed that he would have to repeat another year in school. Like, I find it interesting how a lot of people talk about how messed up his wives were. Well, not Krista that much, because Krista simply neglected her son. She didn't physically abuse him. But it's amazing knowing that they have their father to thank for how they turned out in the end, simply because he believed they wouldn't know human love if they were raised properly by their moms. And so this is the end of part 1 of Worst Anime and Manga Parents. I'm not 100% sure how long it'll take for the next one to come out, but I will try to get it out as soon as possible. So I hope anyone who sees this video enjoys and hopefully looks forward to the next one. See you all soon!